Two neighbors can bring home the exact same paycheck, let's say $75,000 a year. Run the clock forward a decade or two, and you'll usually find one of them completely financially free while the other is still stuck running on the same treadmill. You see this happen all the time. The difference almost never comes down to a lucky break or a secret inheritance. Instead, it comes down to a few specific daily habits, the way they view money, and the quiet choices they make when nobody is watching. We naturally assume a bigger paycheck automatically creates wealth. It feels much better to tell your friends about a big raise than it does to talk about keeping your spending low. Our culture treats a high salary as the finish line, but relying only on your income to build wealth is like trying to drive a car with half an engine. What you earn is just the starting point of the math. If your habits at home don't match the money coming in, that high salary just becomes a wider pipeline for cash to flow right back out of your life. This dynamic leaves hardworking people feeling totally frustrated. Recent studies proved exactly how little income alone actually protects you. They found that a full 33% of people making over $200,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. Think about that math for a second. Someone earning $200,000 is taking home roughly $11,500 every single month after normal taxes. That is a massive amount of cash hitting a bank account every 30 days. Yet, they still run out of money before the next payday. The numbers look just as bad a step down the ladder, with 48% of people earning over $100,000 a year also caught in the exact same trap. The average salary in the US sits around $75,000. So how do folks earning double or triple the national average end up sweating over bills at the end of the month? It usually traces back to three specific traps that quietly drain your bank account, no matter how much you earn. Most people fall into these traps without even noticing, because they feel like normal parts of growing up and becoming successful. But underneath the surface, these habits act like a slow leak in a tire. You will destroy a raise incredibly fast if you automatically upgrade your lifestyle just because the money is sitting there. We see it happen the moment someone gets a promotion. Suddenly, their old car doesn't feel nice enough, or they decide they deserve nicer clothes and expensive dinners out. Back in 1996, a famous book called The Millionaire Next Door actually tracked how the richest 1% in the country really lived. The authors expected to find luxury and excess. Instead, they discovered that the people quietly building the biggest fortunes usually kept their daily lives remarkably cheap. Even as their paychecks grew, their spending stayed flat. They drove older cars, lived in normal neighborhoods, and didn't care about looking rich to the people around them. When you constantly push your spending up to match your income, you leave zero room for your money to actually grow. You're working harder at the office, but your bank account stays completely flat. That creates a terrible feeling of running fast just to stay in the exact same place. You can probably spot this exact pressure in your own daily life. The moment you start doing well, society hands you a script for how you're supposed to act and what you're supposed to buy. If you look closely at high-income careers like medicine or law, you'll notice a lot of deep financial stress hiding behind nice suits. Doctors and lawyers often earn huge paychecks, but they also feel immense pressure to drive luxury cars and buy big houses in the exact same zip codes as their partners. They end up trapped under massive mortgages, leftover student loans, and giant car payments. From the outside, they look incredibly successful. On the inside, they're losing sleep over how to keep the whole machine running. The truth is, the most expensive thing you can buy is the approval of people you barely even know. Every time you skip buying a new phone you don't need, or ignore the urge to upgrade your car, you buy yourself a little piece of freedom instead. That gap between what you make and what you spend is where your actual life gets built. The authors of that 1996 study used a sharp sports comparison to explain this idea. They looked at your salary like the offense on a team. A high income means you have a great offense that can score a lot of points, but your daily spending habits represent your defense. You can score all the points in the world, but if your defense gives up just as many, you still lose the game. A great offense combined with a terrible defense leads straight to being broke. Building real wealth relies heavily on keeping a strong defense. You do that by planning out your money and tracking where every dollar goes before the month even starts. It feels great to focus on earning more, but fixing a leaky bucket is always faster than trying to pour more water into it. When you feel anxious about not having enough money, the answer usually isn't to work a second job or stress over a promotion. The fastest way to take control and calm that anxiety is to look at the money already flowing through your hands and stop it from slipping away on things that don't matter to you. You can also trap yourself in a cycle of being broke by leaning too hard on borrowed money. Credit cards and easy loans make it incredibly tempting to live a life you can't actually afford yet. The danger isn't just the money you owe today. The real danger is how those monthly payments steal from your future choices. When you borrow money to buy a car that loses value the second you drive it home, you're tying rocks to your ankles. You end up paying interest on a piece of metal that is literally worth less every single morning you wake up. It traps you in a cycle where you're working today to pay off yesterday's fun. This causes so much hidden stress because your paycheck gets chopped into tiny pieces before it ever hits your bank account. You look at your phone on payday and the money is already gone to 4 different lenders. Breaking free from this cycle means you have to make a firm decision to stop borrowing money for things that go down in value. Your money should buy you options, not lock you into a rigid schedule of endless monthly bills. Let's look at how this plays out for 2 friends. We'll call them Tom and Jason. Both guys work hard and bring home $75,000 a year. But Tom carries a $5,000 balance on his credit card, sitting at a brutal 20% interest rate. To clear that debt in a year, he has to scrape together about $500 every single month just to feed the bank. That $500 gets ripped right out of his life, leaving him with much less cash to save for emergencies or invest for his future. Jason, on the other hand, refuses to carry bad debt. Since he doesn't owe the bank anything, he takes that same $500 a month and drops it straight into an S&P 500 index fund. Assuming the market returns a steady 8% over the year, Jason ends up with over $6,000 saved up, and it's already starting to grow on its own. Tom spent a year fighting just to get back to zero, while Jason spent the exact same year building a machine that will pay him for the rest of his life. This simple gap explains why 2 people with the exact same job can end up living in entirely different financial universes. If you stretch that exact same scenario out over a few decades, the math gets genuinely scary. That $6,000 Jason invested during year 1 doesn't just sit there. Because of compound interest, that single chunk of money could grow into more than $60,000 over 30 years without him lifting another finger. Meanwhile, Tom lost that $5,000 forever just paying off old credit card swipes. The longer you carry debt, the more violently it drags down your total net worth over time. This is why paying off debt feels like taking a massive weight off your chest. It frees up your future income to finally work for you instead of a bank. A great target for every stage of your adult life is carrying exactly $0 in consumer debt. A mortgage makes sense because a house usually goes up in value, but everything else should be paid in cash. Once you knock out those car loans and clear the credit cards, you take all your power back. You stop running on the treadmill and actually start moving forward, turning your paycheck into a tool for building your own freedom. People also stay financially stuck because they operate totally blind when it comes to where their cash actually goes. It's incredibly easy to tap your phone for small things all week long without ever realizing the real damage. Most of us are terrible at guessing how much we actually spend. If you ask a room full of people to estimate their monthly food bill, almost everyone will guess a number way lower than reality. You might grab a quick lunch out every day just to get out of the office, never realizing you're dropping a couple $100 a month on mediocre sandwiches. When you don't track your numbers, your money just quietly evaporates. It leaves you staring at your bank app on Friday, wondering how you burned through so much cash. Taking the time to look closely at your spending isn't about punishing yourself or stripping away all your fun. It's about bringing the truth out into the open, so you can stop stressing. The fear of looking at your bank account usually goes away the second you write the actual numbers down on paper. Researchers at MIT actually figured out exactly why we lose track of our money so easily. They ran a study where they scanned people's brains while they bought things using either cash or credit cards. The results completely change how you look at a plastic card. They found that buying things with a credit card lights up a part of your brain called the striatum. That specific area controls your reward system. It turns out swiping a card actually feels good. But when people had to hand over physical paper cash, that reward signal barely fired at all. The researchers realized that credit cards trigger overspending in 2 distinct ways. First, they remove the immediate pain of watching your money physically leave your hands. Second, they hit your brain with a quick hit of pleasure when you swipe. You end up trapped in a loop where spending money actually feels like a tiny reward. Knowing this helps you stop blaming yourself for every bad habit. The system is literally designed to make you spend more, so you have to build your own guardrails to fight back. Let's look at the actual choices that separate the wealthy from everyone else. The biggest advantage you can ever give yourself is simply starting early. You don't need a huge income to make this work. We can look at two completely average guys, Mark and David, who both pull in $75,000 a year. David decides to take his 20s seriously. He pulls $2,400 a year out of his paycheck and puts it straight into the market, doing this consistently from age 20 to age 30. That is just 10 years of effort. Mark takes a completely different path. He spends his 20s having a good time, going out constantly and living right on the edge of his bank account. By the time Mark hits 30, he feels that familiar panic and realizes he needs to catch up. So he starts setting aside that exact same $2,400 every single year, but he keeps it up for the next 35 years straight until retirement. You might assume the guy who saved for over 3 decades easily comes out ahead. The math tells a completely different story, and it completely changes how you view your 20s. David only contributed $24,000 of his own cash during that short 10-year window. Mark grinded away for 35 years and put in a total of $84,000 of his own money. Yet, when they both turned 65, David is the one sitting on a much larger pile of cash. That 10-year head start allowed compound interest to do the heavy lifting while he slept. Wealthy people understand that time in the market matters way more than the exact dollar amount you manage to scrape together later on. If Mark had just ignored investing completely, he would have hit 65 with absolutely nothing to show for his working years. David ends up with over $630,000, all from a tiny $24,000 effort when he was young. This proves you don't need a massive salary to win the game. You just need to let time do the hard work for you. When you try to out-earn your past mistakes, you just end up completely exhausted. Putting money away early removes that pressure entirely. It gives you the freedom to live your life knowing the background math is quietly working in your favor every single day. A lot of people fall into a really frustrating trap with their standard checking accounts. You probably know the feeling of logging in on a Friday and seeing the exact same balance you had a month ago. Maybe you normally keep $2,500 in your account. You get a $1,500 paycheck, you pay your rent, you buy groceries, and you spend whatever feels safe on the weekends. When you check your app again right before the next payday, the balance is sitting right back at $2,500. You survived the month, but you didn't actually move forward an inch. The money comes in, and you naturally find a way to spend it all before the cycle completely resets. The smartest fix for this is grabbing money for your future self before you pay a single bill. If you move $250 out of that check the second it lands, you force your lifestyle to adapt to the rest. You know for a solid fact that your future is slowly getting funded. It feels like a tiny habit on a random Tuesday, but repeating this step builds a massive safety net, letting you sleep better at night. The next big gap between the rich and the broke comes down to exactly what they buy on payday. People who build real wealth focus intensely on buying things that put more cash back in their pockets over time. They buy index funds, they invest in local real estate, or they start small businesses on the side. These are assets that eventually produce a completely passive stream of income. A solid stock portfolio can pay you regular cash dividends simply because you own the shares. A small rental property cuts you a check every single month from a tenant. You can take that extra cash and dump it right back into buying even more assets. This creates a powerful loop that grows your net worth on total autopilot. On the other side of the street, most people buy things that constantly drain cash right out of their wallets. They lock themselves into expensive monthly payments for things that look cool today but lose value tomorrow. You end up trading the best years of your working life just to cover the carrying costs of stuff you don't even really want anymore. The most common trap people fall into right here is the modern car payment. A car is almost always a rapidly depreciating asset, meaning it bleeds real value the longer you own it. When you take out a massive auto loan for a brand new truck or SUV, you agree to pay extra interest on a machine that gets cheaper every single time you drive it to the grocery store. You pay the bank a heavy premium just for the privilege of losing your own money over 5 or 6 years. It honestly sounds like a terrible deal when you sit down and look at the actual math. You can clearly see how two neighbors earning the exact same paycheck end up living in totally different financial worlds. One neighbor sinks $1,000 a month into a shiny luxury car that traps them in debt. The other neighbor drives a completely paid off sedan and uses that same $1,000 to buy shares of profitable companies. Fast forward 10 years, and the person who bought the assets can easily afford to buy whatever they want in pure cash. We have talked a lot about daily habits and math, but the invisible force driving all of this is human psychology. Your deepest beliefs about money quietly control every single swipe of your debit card. Many hardworking people operate purely from a mindset of deep scarcity. They live with a constant, exhausting worry that the money will suddenly stop flowing, even when their current bank account is totally fine. If you tell them to invest a chunk of cash, their brain immediately flashes bright red warning signs. They refuse to take any risk at all because they firmly believe losing a single dollar is a total disaster. So they just hoard their cash in a basic savings account, letting inflation slowly eat away at their daily buying power. You see this exact pattern all the time in families who survived really hard economic times in the past. The parents teach their kids to hold on tight to every single penny because they remember what it felt like to have absolutely nothing. That fear keeps them safely afloat, but it also stops them from ever actually enjoying the life they worked so hard to build. That exact same scarcity panic can also trigger the complete opposite reaction in a lot of folks. Some people feel so incredibly stressed about their financial future that they just give up and blow their paychecks on immediate comfort. They buy expensive takeout every night or finance a flashy watch just to feel some brief relief from the daily pressure. They assume they will never really get ahead anyway, so they might as well enjoy Tuesday night. The people who actually break out of this cycle operate from a mindset of abundance. They firmly believe the world has plenty of money going around and they know they can figure out a way to earn more of it. Because they aren't completely paralyzed by fear, they see money simply as a tool to build a much better tomorrow. They easily drop a few $1,000s on a tough training program or a live event to learn a totally new skill. Other people in their family might call that a crazy waste of cash, but the person spending it knows they are buying an upgrade for their own brain, and that new skill will pay them back 10 times over in the real world. If you want to permanently stay out of the broke category, you have to start taking very practical steps with your own cash right now. It always starts with writing down a clear, honest plan. Think about a crew trying to build a giant bridge across a massive river. They do not just show up with a pile of heavy steel and start guessing where the bolts should go. They need an exact, detailed blueprint before they pour a single ounce of wet concrete. Your personal money works the exact same way. If you don't give your dollars a specific job on a piece of paper, they will wander off and find a job you really don't like. Writing down a simple monthly budget forces you to look at the cold hard math of your actual life. It shows you exactly how much breathing room you really have between paychecks. Once you see the numbers clearly on a screen, you completely stop guessing at the grocery store checkout. You can finally start steering your cash toward the goals that actually matter to your family, instead of just hoping everything magically works out by the end of the month. The next major step is violently clearing out any toxic consumer debt hanging over your head. When you finally stop handing a huge chunk of your paycheck to a random credit card company, you suddenly unlock a massive amount of free cash to actually play with. This directly feeds into the most crucial daily habit of all: saving and investing on absolute purpose. The wealthy do not just wait around to see if any spare cash survives the weekend. They lock in their stock market investments the very second they get paid, making sure their future is completely secured before they buy anything fun. The only way you can ever actually pull this off in the real world is by living on significantly less money than you bring home. You have to actively fight the heavy urge to upgrade your apartment or buy a nicer car every single time your boss hands you a raise. It always circles back to that quiet gap between what you make and what you spend. That gap is the only place where true wealth actually has room to grow. If you close the gap by spending every dime, you lock yourself out of the game completely. At the end of the day, learning how to manage your money isn't really about memorizing complicated math formulas or hunting down the absolute best credit card points. It is actually about learning how to clearly manage yourself. Your bank account is really just a giant mirror reflecting your daily habits, your deepest fears, and your hidden beliefs right back at you. When you finally understand why you feel that sudden, stressful urge to buy things you don't even need, you gain total control over where your future is actually heading. You stop blaming your boss or the local economy, and you start building a quiet machine that buys your freedom back a little bit at a time. The math is the easy part. Getting your own brain on board is where the real work happens. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to keep exploring the actual psychology behind building real wealth without the confusing jargon, hit the subscribe button so we can keep pulling these ideas apart together next time.